Now, I know it's a few days before Christmas, it's the silly season, but I tell you what, been a few times this week I've wondered whether I've had too much to drink and become maybe a little too silly. I mean, I'm not sure if I've been living in Australia, let alone what side this country's on. If the Prime Minister's goal was to alienate all our allies and make friends with all our enemies, well, Mr Albanese, you've done a stellar job. I mean, we've been talking all week, of course, about whether or not we'd send a warship to the Red Sea to help the United States defend one of the world's most important trade routes against Iranian-backed pirates. As we now know, Defence Minister Richard Marles knocked back that request and instead opted to send a few more ADF personnel instead. Here he was talking to Kieran Gilbert yesterday.
To take a major asset and put it in the Middle East is to take a major asset away from what we're doing in the immediate region, in areas like the South China Sea and the East China Sea, and that would be a mistake.
Now, it's bad enough as it is. There are only two options here. Either we don't have enough boats or capable enough boats to send to the Red Sea, which would be an indictment on our defence capabilities, or we simply didn't want to help out the US, which is a brutal and bald-faced snub of one of our biggest allies. And lo and behold, the decision not to send a ship has been praised by the Chinese Communist Party. The Global Times, which is a CCP-owned newspaper, published an opinion piece by some dope called Jerry Gray, who wrote that Australia, quote, has finally stepped out of the US's shadow to call for a ceasefire and could potentially act as a mediator in the conflict if needed. That opportunity will be lost if it has a military presence in the region. It's sensible for Australia to continue distancing itself from the US. Gee, wonder why the CCP would want Australia to distance itself from the US. This piece also rubbished the idea that intervention in the Red Sea was required at all, saying that despite claims that Houthi rebels are attacking commercial vessels with ballistic missiles, the available information is that they caused no significant damage and no injuries and, quote, so far, no photos of damage have been offered as evidence, not one ship has been disabled and not one crew member lost. They clearly missed this video of the Houthis hijacking a ship and taking the crew hostage at gunpoint. One wonders whether maybe the fact they haven't seen that in China is because China won't let them see it. But, you know, they haven't been lost, so it's okay. These are the friends Anthony Albanese is making. And then you have his other new best mate, senior Hamas leader Ghazi Hamad, who is thrilled that Australia wants a ceasefire in Gaza.
The Hamas movement is watching the growing calls by several Western governments to end the aggression on Gaza, the last of which was the statement by Canada, Australia and New Zealand backing sustainable ceasefire in Gaza. We welcome these developments and consider them in the right direction toward isolation the fascist Israeli government.
You certainly wouldn't want the PM to organise your references on your resume, would you? Now, that video is unverified, but Albanese took it seriously enough to publicly address it multiple times today.
I don't intend to give them anything other than the contempt that they deserve. They have my contempt. They're a designated terrorist organisation. My statement very clearly, along with the Canadian Prime Minister and the New Zealand Prime Minister, makes it very clear that Hamas should have no role in the future governance in Gaza.
I mean, all of this was quite predictable. Here we are, a nation in the West, openly and actively snubbing our allies, and our effective enemies are having a field day with it. I mean, calling for a ceasefire was a free kick to all the Jew haters who keep protesting in our cities, and a free kick to Hamas. They loved it, as we just saw. And don't forget that Albanese was the CCP's pick for Prime Minister. The Global Times, the CCP-owned newspaper I mentioned before, said that he, quote, positively shined compared to Morrison in the lead up to last year's federal election. Is it any wonder when his interactions with Xi Jinping go something like this? And I know I've already played this clip this week, but it's too good not to show again.
President Xi relayed stories about his visits to Australia, including we had an exchange about, he spoke about the Tasmanian devils as being cute animals in Australia. I pointed out that whilst I like Tasmanian devils, they're probably not as cute as pandas.